What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty Peak here with another episode of Steelers War Room. We're almost at the end of our 2024 NFL Draft prospects because this year's NFL Draft is just a matter of days away. When we finish these, we've got safety today, and next video will come out. We'll be out in the edge rushers. And then after that, we will compile all the guys that we've covered across all these different videos into a top 75. I'm going to try and rank them all for you across all 3 days, just like we did last year, top 75 to top 90 players in this year's NFL's draft that are Steelers fits, but they're ranked in terms of their prospect ranking, and then obviously by their Steeler fits, as that's how I've selected them. All right, today let's get cracking to it. We are getting into safety. We're going to do three things. I'm going to show you my top safeties, the top 8 to 9 guys. Then we're going to look at where they sit on Pro Football Network's draft board, for example, and then we're going to look at some of their stats and numbers out of PFF as well. So let's get into it. All right, first of all, we are going to talk about the guys. So we have got Cooper DeJean. That is my first guy on the list. Now, he's probably a cornerback, but he can play safety. He's more of a free safety. I have him there as a fit for the Steelers, but I don't have the Steelers taking a free safety in this draft. You'll see that a lot of the guys on my screen right now for you are strong safety guys, more or guys that can play both positions, but including strong safety. The Steelers signed Deshaun Elliott. I'm very high on Deshaun Elliott, but I do think they could get younger at safety. I do think Kazi has limitations as that third safety because he's more of a deep safety rather than someone that can play in the box. With how many teams using tight end in the AFC and AFC North particularly, think about the AFC North, Brock Bowers could go to the Bengals. That's a rumor if he doesn't go earlier. You also have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely with Baltimore. Cleveland having Njoku, and there are a couple of other guys that they've got as well. Other guys that go around, the Bills have got Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. I can go through all these different AFC teams, but a lot of AFC teams have good tight ends. So if you're going to be able to compete in the AFC and in the playoffs, you need guys that can mark up against them. All right, the next guy I've got is Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. He's a day 1 to day 2 player, a guy that could fall in the back of the first. Probably, though, goes early day 2. I know Big G over at the Pump Your Brakes podcast that Shannon White, my co-host on Steelers Gold Perspective, the show that he does, Pump Your Brakes on another network, he's really high on Tyler Nubin. He thinks he could be like a Polamalu light or a second coming of Polamalu, but without putting that tag on him. I do like Tyler Nubin, but to me, he's more of, if you're playing left and right safety, I don't see him as deep, strong safety. Based on his weight right now, if he's happy to play at 6-7 pounds heavier, maybe. But he at the combine, he tested in at 199 pounds. Then you got Cameron Kitchen out. Cameron Kitchen's out of Miami. There's 2 Miami guys that played next to each other on this list. But Cameron Kitchens was at the start of the draft process, probably was more looking as a first-round pick. He's a day 2 player. That's my grade on him. But if he goes into day 1, don't be surprised to see it. It'll all come down to what people think, particularly if you do play left and right safety. He's about 205, 206 pound playing weight. Had about 5 or 6 interceptions, I think it was last year. He's a good player. So expect him to go probably top 50, depending on if there's a run at safety at all. And you got Cole Bishop out of Utah. This is one of Greg Cosell's favorite players in the NFL draft. Particularly this position, a guy that's made a sack last year, a guy that's super athletic on tape. Strikes me as a bit of a Taylor Rapp kind of player, but maybe better. But played at Utah, a really good player. I like him for the Steelers, but again, he'd have to slip to the back of day 2. And at least 4 guys, apart from Cooper DeJean, if you draft him as like an all-round DB. I think Cole Bishop's probably the earliest guy you're taking. Then you got Jaden Hicks, 211 pounds at the combine, out of Washington State, really proven producer. Played it, he's got a decent amount of snaps in college. I quite like him. I like him early day 3 as opposed to day 2 for the Steelers, just because we did feel the need of Deshaun Elliott in the free agency. But to get a young guy that can spell Minka, spell Deshaun Elliott, can play up there against tight ends, I do like the idea of bringing Jaden Hicks into the mix in and around the box. Then you got James Williams. Now, James Williams made my top linebacker guys. The guy's 6'5", 226 pounds. A lot of 4-3 teams are going to think of this guy like an Isaiah Simmons sort of style player. They're going to try and play him at safety. I think he's a better linebacker in a 3-4, but I consider him just an all-round versatile box player and tight end defender. And so with James Williams, I personally think if you can get him early day 3, he's ranked, I think, 101 on PFN's draft boards. I think PFF have him in the top 60, 70. He's kind of differs between 50 to 110 on different boards, depending on whether people have him at linebacker or at safety. A linebacker who shoots up the list more because they're projecting his potential with his speed and weight and athleticism and height. particularly at 6'5". I like him as a linebacker, but I put him here because of the versatility and what I think in terms of a Steelers fit at safety, because I do think he's a better safety for the Steelers than a linebacker, but I wasn't going to miss putting him as a linebacker either. The fact he can play both is a really big, strong suit in why you would get him in the 100th pick. Play special teams early on, play safety, play linebacker, lock down the box. Really, really like it. Let Deshaun Elliott do his thing, particularly if Deshaun Elliott, and that's the other thing to keep in mind. Deshaun Elliott may have to play in the slot depending on what the Steelers do at cornerback. So Deshaun Elliott may have to play some slot snaps. If so, you need someone to step in at strong safety. You can never have enough strong safeties. We saw that last year with the whole Keanu Neal thing and having to figure that out through the season. I'd love to bring a young bloke on. And then we can do more about playing Minka where Minka plays best. All right, then we've got Kaiton Oladapo out of Oregon State. He is pretty much a tight end defender. That was his summary for the Pro Football Network's draft board for a long time. He's just a tight end defender. I like it late day 3. He's a guy that's like later than 220 to 280 in terms of prospects on people's boards. But if you get him late in the 7th round, or you can get him as a UDFA even, I like this guy on day 3 or UDFA because of the fact he can mark up against tight ends, and that was where the Steelers were weak last year. And when they're not weak, they have to overuse Minka Fitzpatrick. Then I've got Trey Taylor, a similar type out of Air Force, over 200 pounds as well, like Kaiton Oladapo. These guys are like 210, 211. The thing about Trey Taylor, which is exciting, is he's a bit unheralded out of Air Force. He's a big guy. I think he tested in at at 6'4", I think it was overall. Again, another tight end defender, probably better athlete naturally than Kaiton Oladapo. A guy that he could go anywhere on day 3. You might see him even fall as a UDFA. You might see him taken higher as well. It'll be really interesting to see how teams project him, but he is a really good sort of tight end defender as well. I kind of like the upside more than Kaiton. Besides the upside of Trey Taylor more than Kaiton, but Kaiton's probably got a bit more proven performance. But we'll delve into that in just a moment. All right, looking at the Pro Football Network's big board, you look at my guys, Cooper DeJean, Tyler Nubin, Cole Bishop. That's pretty much how we went. Now, I did have Cameron Kitchens and Cole Bishop there next to each other as both day 2 guys. That's kind of interesting. They have Cameron Kitchens way down on this list, but I think they're ignoring a bit of production. I have evaluated it differently. They also have him at 107 because of other guys and other prospects they've ranked, like Kalen Bullock and Javon Bullard. Those guys are more free safeties. Bullard's a very good safety. He's plug-and-play NFL starter. But the problem is he's a free safety. That doesn't really fit what the Steelers need. Jaden Hicks, as I said, I've got him as a grade 2 to 3 as well. I've got that with Williams based on the potential of Williams. But if I was picking a strong safety to plug and play for the Steelers as their guy behind Elliott and behind Minka, and it had to be a strong safety, the first guy I'm picking of the first 5 guys is Jaden Hicks, because purely from that perspective of size and being a more traditional strong safety. Then you got to go right down the list. Kaiton Oladapo at 226, Trey Taylor at 246, and that kind of gives you a good perspective on how these guys are being ranked by other different draft sites. Now, as I've done with all the other prospects, if you look at I like to have a look at their PFF numbers, because PFF has an overall number of more stats than Sports Reference. Otherwise, I use Sports Reference, which is the college version of Pro Football Reference. So as I've done with every other prospect, we're looking at the draft year. We're looking at 2023 production. We're looking at a minimum of 50% of snaps of the player at the position that played the most snaps. The most snaps played at safety last year was 977 snaps. So these guys have to have played over 438 snaps to make this list. All right, so the first guy we have off the list in terms of overall defensive grade is Tyler Nubin. Surprise, surprise. Then we've got Kaiton Oladapo. Again, surprise, surprise. Then you have Trey Taylor. Surprise. Now, people that know and are the subs to the channel, you know I've been on Trey Taylor since early into February, going back all that way. But these guys definitely show up in terms of their production. Didn't necessarily play at the absolute top schools, but they still got really proven production. Jaden Hicks is in there at 22 with a 77 defensive grade. Cameron Kitchens comes in to play on this list. I've got to go back up to him. I saw him there. James Williams is 33. And then I've scrolled past. I know Cameron Kitchens. I saw him earlier when I was just checking a couple of little things. It's been a while since I had a look at the sheet. Anyway, but I know he is there. But it is kind of interesting as well when you look at what these guys did in terms of their sack numbers. It's interesting. I always like looking at sacks for safeties. Cole Bishop with 3, Jaden Hicks with 3, Trey Taylor with 2. Evan Williams out of Oregon was an interesting prospect. He just didn't quite have the size for me for what I think the Steelers need at strong safety. Then you got to go way down the list before you get to my next set of guys. It was hard not to pick in my list as well. Malik Mustafa. There's something about him as a prospect. I think these guys offer more. And Malik Mustafa will probably go quite early day 3, if not late day 2. I think as well, when I started to look at it, missed tackles is a big one that I look at with defensive players, particularly safeties and linebackers. This was where I thought it was interesting out of all our prospects that I had on my top list. Usually this is a really big marker for me. Tyler McNubin was the first guy on our list to come in. That kind of was a bit of a disappointment in terms of the overall guys. But Cooper DeJean has a low missed tackle rate, and he's listed as a cornerback in this list. He's not listed as a safety, so that's one thing to keep in mind. It was also hard to keep Damani Richardson off my list, but again, I feel like he's going to be a better deep safety, free safety compared to a traditional strong safety. Trey Taylor came in at 36, and then we go right down before we get to anyone else that I had. So that kind of was a little bit disappointing to me, but we're talking 13% missed tackles. That's actually quite a low number for some safeties. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. I did sort of as well when I was looking at this, think it was interesting overall how many targets some of these guys faced as well, because I think the targets is a really big, interesting component of how much pass coverage you're playing. And none of the guys really fell into this top list, but that is because teams don't want to throw their way. Trey Taylor was, I think, the first guy overall from our prospects, and he hit at 42. Then it was Clayton Aldapo, and then no one else fell in the top 50. But I wanted to mention that point because it's like these guys are good safeties, and the college coaches are scheming against them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But is there a name on this list that you guys like as a prospect at safety? As I said, we'll recap them quickly. Cooper DeJean, Tyler Nubin, Cameron Kitchens, Cole Bishop, Jaden Hicks, James Williams, Clayton Aldapo, and Trey Taylor. Some of them come from more obscure colleges than others, but these guys are all proven performers in their own way. And this is kind of how the draft will fall for these more strong safety types. Any of these guys from day 2 onwards, I don't hate it if the Steelers pick it. I know the Steelers need offensive linemen, cornerbacks, wide receivers, but if you can shore up a position here, it's going to really help your defense. And it may lessen the pressure on you drafting a linebacker in late day 2, early day 3 as well. It's kind of why I really like this James Williams hybrid idea. But you let me know in the comments. I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.